Marcus Chen sat alone in the corner of the Nexus Station's cantina, nursing a glass of synthol while alien laughter echoed around him. The massive space station served as a neutral trading hub for dozens of species, but neutrality didn't extend to social acceptance. Every few minutes, another group would glance his way, whisper something in their native tongue, and burst into what he assumed were jokes at his expense. "Look at the hairless ape," hissed a Vorthak merchant, its serpentine neck craning toward Marcus's table. "Still thinks it belongs among civilized beings." Marcus had heard worse. Much worse. In the 3 months since he'd arrived at Nexus Station, seeking work as an independent trader, he'd been called every derogatory term imaginable. Meatbrain, fleshwalker, primitive. The aliens seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding him that humans were the newest species to achieve interstellar travel. Barely 2 decades after their first contact with the Galactic Confederation, the bartender, a hulking Gorlax with 4 arms and crystalline skin, slammed another drink on the counter. "Payment in advance, human," it growled. "Your kind has a reputation for running when bills come due." "It's months of a nick starting." Marcus placed his credit chip on the bar without argument. He'd learned that fighting every insult only made things worse. The Gorlax scanned the chip with obvious reluctance, as if touching anything a human had handled might contaminate it. "Surprised you haven't crawled back to your little backwater system yet," commented a Zalani trader at the next table. The feline-like being's whiskers twitched with amusement. "Most of your species can't handle real civilization." The comment stung because it hit close to home. Marcus had left Earth precisely because he couldn't handle the suffocating oversight of the Terran colonial administration. Every human venture beyond their home system required mountains of paperwork, safety inspections, and approval from multiple bureaucratic committees. The TCA treated their own people like children who needed constant supervision. But out here, beyond Earth's protective bubble, Marcus discovered that the rest of the galaxy viewed humans as something worse than children. They saw them as inferior beings who'd stumbled into space technology through dumb luck, rather than earned it through evolution and wisdom. "I heard Terra's planning to recall all independent operators," the Zalani continued, clearly enjoying the humans' discomfort. "Apparently your government finally realized you people aren't ready for the big galaxy." Marcus's jaw tightened. The rumors had been circulating for weeks. The TCA was indeed considering mandatory repatriation for all humans operating outside official colonial zones. They claimed it was for safety reasons, but Marcus knew better. Earth's government was embarrassed by how poorly humans were received in galactic society. A new voice joined the conversation, this one belonging to a Catherian arms dealer Marcus recognized from previous encounters. The insectoid being clicked its mandibles in what passed for laughter among its species. "Remember that human freighter captain who tried to negotiate with the hegemony last month?" The Catherian buzzed. "Walked right into their trap because he couldn't tell the difference between a trade invitation and a hunting permit. Typical human stupidity." The cantina erupted in alien laughter. Marcus knew the story. Captain Rodriguez had been trying to establish new trade routes when he'd misinterpreted a deliberately ambiguous message from the draconian hegemony. His ship had been impounded, his cargo seized, and he'd barely escaped with his life. The incident had become a popular joke throughout the sector. "At least it was quick," added a morphid trader, its gelatinous form rippling with mirth. "Better than the slow death most humans face out here. Starvation, equipment failure, or just getting lost because they can't read proper star charts." Marcus finished his drink and stood to leave. He'd heard enough for one evening. As he walked toward the exit, the conversations followed him. "There goes another one," someone called out. "Watch him shuffle back to his little corner of the station. Wonder how long before he breaks and runs home to Mommy Earth. 50 credits says he's gone within a week." The automatic doors hissed shut behind him, cutting off the laughter but not the humiliation. Marcus made his way through the station's corridors, past shops and businesses that displayed signs in dozens of alien scripts, but rarely bothered with human translations. Even when they did, the translations were often deliberately insulting or incorrect. His quarters were located in Section C7, the cheapest residential area on the station. Most of the other inhabitants were refugees, criminals, or beings from species so primitive they made humans look advanced by comparison. The irony wasn't lost on him. The small room contained little more than a sleeping pod, a basic computer terminal, and a tiny food synthesizer that produced barely edible paste. Marcus activated his personal communicator and checked for messages, hoping against hope that someone might have responded to his trade inquiries. Nothing. For 3 months, he'd sent proposals to trading companies, mining operations, and exploration syndicates. He'd offered to work for rates below standard wages, to take on routes other captains deemed too dangerous or unprofitable. Every response had been the same. "Thank you for your inquiry, but we don't currently have positions suitable for human operators." The polite rejections were almost worse than the outright insults. At least, the aliens in the cantina were honest about their contempt. Marcus pulled up his financial records on the terminal. His savings were nearly depleted. Station fees, docking charges, and basic living expenses had eaten through his reserve funds faster than he'd anticipated. He had maybe 2 weeks left before he'd be forced to sell his ship just to pay for passage back to Earth. The ship, his one remaining asset, and his only ticket to independence. The Wanderer was a modified light freighter he'd purchased with his entire savings after resigning from the Terran Merchant Marine. She wasn't much to look at, but she was space-worthy and legally his. More importantly, she represented freedom from the bureaucratic nightmare that was Earth's government. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Marcus's heart jumped as he opened the communication channel. But his excitement quickly turned to disappointment. It was another form letter rejection, this one from a mining consortium in the Outer Rim. "Dear Captain Chen," the message read, "while we appreciate your interest in our organization, we must inform you that all our current contracts are filled by experienced operators from established species. We suggest you consider seeking employment through official Terran colonial channels, as independent human traders rarely achieve long-term success in competitive markets." The same polite dismissal, wrapped in diplomatic language that barely concealed the underlying message. Humans didn't belong in serious business. Marcus deleted the message and leaned back in his chair. Through his small porthole, he could see other ships coming and going from the station. Sleek Zelani cruisers, massive Gorlax haulers, elegant Vorthak passenger liners, all of them operated by beings who belonged in this galaxy, who had earned their place through centuries or millennia of spacefaring tradition. And then there was humanity, the galactic equivalent of country cousins who'd shown up uninvited to a sophisticated dinner party. The worst part was that the other species weren't entirely wrong. Humans had achieved interstellar travel through a combination of desperation, stubbornness, and technological shortcuts, rather than the gradual evolution most species experienced. When environmental collapse had threatened Earth, humanity had thrown everything into developing faster than light travel, in a matter of decades rather than centuries. The result was a species that could travel between stars, but still struggled with basic concepts like galactic law, interspecies diplomacy, and trade protocols that had been standardized for thousands of years. Humans were like children playing with adult toys, and the rest of the galaxy treated them accordingly. A knock at his door interrupted his brooding. Marcus opened it to find Zixtal, a Rylothian information broker who operated out of the station's lower levels. The amphibian-like being's skin was mottled green and brown, and its large eyes held the calculating look of someone who made a living from other people's secrets. "Marcus Chen," Zixtal said in its wet, gurgling voice, "I have information that might interest you." Marcus stepped aside to let the broker enter. Zixtal had been one of the few beings willing to do business with him, though always at premium rates, and with terms heavily favored toward the alien. "I'm listening," Marcus said, though he doubted he could afford whatever the Rylothian was selling. "There's talk in the lower sectors," Zixtal began, settling its bulk onto Marcus's only chair. "Whispers about opportunities for someone desperate enough to take significant risks." "What kind of opportunities?" Zixtal's throat sac inflated slightly, a sign of amusement. "The kind that established captains won't touch. The kind that might appeal to a human with nothing left to lose." Marcus felt a flicker of interest despite himself. "Go on. Have you heard of the Gehenna Reach?" Marcus had. It was a region of space marked as hazardous on most star charts, filled with unstable systems, gravitational anomalies, and worse. Most captains gave it a wide berth. What about it? There are rumors of a derelict station somewhere in that region. Pre-Confederation technology, possibly from one of the lost civilizations. The kind of find that could make someone very wealthy, or very dead. Marcus thought but didn't say. He'd heard similar stories before. Space was full of legends about lost treasures and ancient technologies waiting to be discovered. Most of them were just that, legends. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Zixtal's large eyes blinked slowly. "Because no one else is foolish enough to investigate. The region is considered too dangerous for civilized beings to explore. But a human? A desperate human with nothing to lose? You might be primitive enough to survive where others cannot." The insult was delivered almost casually, but Marcus was used to such comments by now. What interested him was the underlying implication, that sometimes being considered primitive might be an advantage. "What makes you think I'm interested? Your financial records are a matter of public record," Zixtal replied matter-of-factly. "You have approximately 12 standard days before your accounts are insufficient to maintain station residency. After that, you'll be classified as indigent and subject to deportation." Marcus winced. He'd hoped his situation wasn't quite so transparent. "I have the coordinates," Zixtal continued. "Approximate location based on sensor readings from ships that survived passage through the region. It will cost you everything you have left, but what good are credits to you if you're forced to return to Earth in disgrace?" It was a fair point. Marcus could either spend his remaining funds on basic survival for another week or two, then face the humiliation of crawling back to Earth, or he could gamble everything on one desperate chance to change his situation. "Show me the coordinates." Zixtal produced a data chip from somewhere within its mottled hide. "Standard information broker rates apply. All sales final. No guarantees of accuracy or survival." Marcus took the chip and inserted it into his terminal. The coordinates appeared on his screen, marking a location deep within the Gehenna Reach. According to his navigation database, the journey would take approximately 6 days through some of the most dangerous space in the galaxy. "How do I know this isn't just another way to separate a desperate human from his money?" Zixtal's throat sac inflated again. "You don't. But consider the alternative. Return to Earth as a failure, or die trying to succeed. For a human, those may be the only options you have." The brutal honesty was almost refreshing after months of polite rejections and veiled insults. At least Zixtal was being direct about the risks involved. Marcus transferred his remaining credits to the Rylothian's account. It hurt to watch his balance drop to nearly zero. But Zixtal was right. What good were credits if he was going to be deported anyway? "Pleasure doing business with you," Zixtal said, standing to leave. "Try not to die too quickly. It would reflect poorly on my information." After the broker left, Marcus stared at the coordinates on his screen. 6 days to reach the location. However long it took to search for whatever might be there. And 6 days to return, assuming he survived the journey at all. He thought about the aliens in the cantina, placing bets on how long he'd last before running back to Earth. They expected him to fail, because that's what humans did in their eyes. They were weak, primitive, and unable to handle the harsh realities of galactic civilization. Maybe it was time to prove them wrong. Marcus began plotting a course for the Gehenna Reach. The journey to the Gehenna Reach tested every system on the Wanderer and every skill Marcus had learned during his years in the Merchant Marine. The space charts hadn't lied about the dangers. Gravitational anomalies pulled his ship off course every few hours, requiring constant navigation adjustments. Solar flares from unstable stars bombarded his shields with radiation that would have killed most organic beings within minutes. But humans, Marcus reflected as he manually recalibrated his sensors for the 100th time, were remarkably good at surviving things that should have killed them. Earth's harsh evolutionary pressure had produced a species that could adapt to almost anything, even if they looked primitive doing it. On the 4th day, his long-range sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. 3 ships were following him, maintaining just enough distance to avoid immediate detection. Marcus enhanced the sensor readings and felt his stomach drop. Zelani interceptors, sleek and deadly, with enough firepower to vaporize his modest freighter in seconds. They'd been waiting for him. Marcus cursed himself for his naivety. Of course, Zixtal had sold the information to multiple parties. The Rylothian information broker probably made more profit from setting up desperate fools than from legitimate intelligence sales. The question was whether the Zalani pirates planned to kill him immediately or wait to see if he actually found something worth stealing. He had his answer an hour later when the lead interceptor opened a communication channel. "Human vessel," came a smooth, cultured voice that dripped with feline arrogance. "You will maintain your current course and speed. Any deviation will result in immediate termination." Marcus kept his comm channel closed, but adjusted his displays to get a better look at his pursuers. The ships were top-of-the-line military hardware, not the crude raiders he might have been able to outrun. Whoever was behind this operation had serious resources. "We know you purchased coordinates from the Rylothian," the voice continued. "How thoughtful of your species to provide us with such convenient bait. Continue to your destination, human. We'll be watching." The channel closed, leaving Marcus alone with the realization that he'd been played by experts. The Zalani weren't just following him, they were using him as an expendable scout to probe a dangerous region they were unwilling to explore themselves. If he died in the attempt, they lost nothing. If he survived and found something valuable, they'd simply take it from him. Marcus considered his options. He could try to run, but the interceptors were faster and better armed. He could attempt to communicate with other ships in the region, but his sensors showed empty space in every direction. The Gehenna Reach was aptly named. It was a stellar graveyard where sensible beings feared to travel. That left him with one choice: continue forward and hope he could find some advantage at the destination. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all he had. The final 2 days of travel brought new horrors: dead systems littered with the remains of shattered worlds, debris fields that had once been space stations or ships from civilizations that existed before the Confederation was even a dream. The background radiation was so intense that Marcus had to route power from non-essential systems just to keep his shields operational. His Zalani shadows maintained their distance, occasionally transmitting cryptic messages that reminded him they were still there. Marcus began to understand their strategy. They were letting the journey weaken his ship and drain his resources while keeping their own vessels safe from the worst hazards. On the 6th day, his sensors finally detected something artificial among the cosmic wreckage. A massive structure, roughly spherical, drifting between the orbit of 2 dead planets. Even at extreme range, Marcus could tell it was enormous, easily 10 times the size of Nexus Station. "Unknown structure detected," he transmitted to his unwelcome escorts. "Approaching for closer examination." "Acknowledged, human," came the reply. "Remember, you are expendable. We are not." As if he needed the reminder, Marcus piloted the Wanderer through a field of metallic debris toward the mysterious station. Up close, the structure was even more impressive and terrifying. Its surface was covered with geometric patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Docking ports of various sizes suggested it had been designed to accommodate multiple species. But the architecture followed no design principles he recognized. His sensors detected atmosphere within parts of the structure, though the readings were inconsistent. Life support appeared to be functioning in some sections while others showed hard vacuum. Most disturbing of all, there were energy readings that suggested some systems were still active after what might have been millennia of abandonment. "Fascinating," transmitted one of his Zalani pursuers. "Proceed with docking, human. We're curious to see what kills you first." Marcus maneuvered toward what appeared to be a cargo bay large enough to accommodate his ship. As he approached, the massive doors began to open without any signal from him. Internal lights flickered to life, revealing a cavernous space that could have held dozens of ships his size. Emergency protocols screamed warnings about unknown pathogens, atmospheric contamination, and structural instability. But Marcus overrode them all. He was past the point of caution. Besides, his environmental suit would protect him from most biological hazards, and his tricorder would warn him about radiation or toxic gases. The docking process was surprisingly smooth. Magnetic clamps engaged automatically, securing the Wanderer to the deck with gentle precision. Atmospheric readings showed the bay was pressurized with a breathable mixture, though Marcus had no intention of removing his helmet. "Docking successful," he transmitted. "Beginning exploration." "Excellent," replied the Zilani commander. "Do try to avoid triggering any automated defenses. We'd hate to lose our Pathfinder so early in the process." Marcus gathered his portable scanner, emergency supplies, and the one weapon he owned, a military-grade plasma pistol he'd purchased during his merchant marine days. It wouldn't do much good against serious threats, but it made him feel slightly less helpless. The station's interior was a maze of corridors and chambers that defied logical mapping. Gravity seemed to work differently in various sections, sometimes pulling him toward what should have been walls or ceilings. The geometric patterns from the exterior continued inside, covering surfaces with designs that hurt to look at directly. His scanner detected traces of dozens of different atmospheric compositions, suggesting the station had indeed hosted multiple species. But there were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of what had happened to the inhabitants. They had simply vanished, leaving behind technology that continued to function without maintenance or oversight. Marcus made his way deeper into the structure, following energy readings that grew stronger as he approached the station's core. Emergency lighting activated as he passed, creating pools of illumination that faded behind him like ripples in water. The effect was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. In one chamber, he discovered what appeared to be a library or data archive. Crystalline storage units lined the walls, each one containing information stored in formats he couldn't read. His scanner detected quantum-level data compression that exceeded anything in current Confederation technology. If even a fraction of this information could be deciphered, it would revolutionize galactic civilization. Another chamber contained machinery that defied easy classification, devices that seemed to manipulate matter at the molecular level, energy generators that drew power from unknown sources, and transportation systems that might represent instantaneous travel between distant locations. The technological implications were staggering, but the most significant discovery waited in the station's central core. Marcus emerged into a vast spherical chamber that stretched beyond the reach of his lights. In the center, suspended by forces he couldn't identify, hung a structure that looked like a three-dimensional star map. Points of light marked locations throughout the galaxy, connected by lines of energy that pulsed with information. As he approached, the display shifted and focused on a familiar region of space. His scanner began receiving data transmissions of incredible complexity, navigation charts, resource locations, and what appeared to be detailed intelligence about every major civilization in the galaxy, including humanity. The information about Earth was extensive and recent, far more current than should have been possible for a station that predated human space travel. Population centers, military installations, technological capabilities, and political structures were all mapped with disturbing accuracy. Someone, or something, had been watching humanity's development with great interest. Marcus was so absorbed in the data that he almost missed the sound of approaching footsteps. He spun around to find a figure emerging from the shadows at the chamber's edge. Human in general appearance, but wrong in subtle ways that triggered every survival instinct he possessed. "Greetings, Marcus Chen," the figure said in perfect English. "We have been waiting for one of your species to find us." The being looked like a human who had been subtly altered. Its proportions were slightly off, its movements too fluid, and its eyes held an intelligence that seemed ancient beyond measure. When it smiled, Marcus caught a glimpse of teeth that were just sharp enough to be threatening. "What are you?" Marcus managed to ask. "We are what your species might become," the being replied. "Given time, guidance, and the proper incentives. We are the evolved." Marcus's scanner was going crazy, detecting energy patterns and biological readings that defied classification. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't entirely organic. "The station? A research facility," the evolved explained casually. "We study emerging species, catalog their development, and occasionally intervene when we detect potential. Humanity has shown remarkable promise despite its primitive origins." The casual dismissal stung, but Marcus was more concerned about the implications. "You've been watching us? For several centuries, your species' rapid development caught our attention. Most civilizations require millennia to achieve interstellar travel. Humans accomplished it in mere decades when properly motivated." "Motivated by what?" The evolved smile widened. Crisis, of course. Desperation breeds innovation in your species more effectively than comfort. Environmental collapse, resource scarcity, the threat of extinction, these drive humans to achieve the impossible. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. You caused Earth's environmental problems? Influenced. The being corrected. Subtle adjustments to weather patterns, carefully timed resource depletion. The introduction of certain technological concepts at crucial moments. Nothing that couldn't be attributed to natural causes or human behavior. The magnitude of the revelation was overwhelming. Humanity's greatest crisis, the event that had driven them to the stars, had been artificially engineered by beings who viewed them as laboratory specimens. Why? Marcus whispered. Because you showed potential, the evolved replied. Most species that achieve space travel do so gradually, developing wisdom alongside technology. But a few rare civilizations can be pushed to greatness through adversity. They become stronger, more adaptable, more dangerous than species that evolve naturally. Dangerous? To the established order, the being confirmed. The galaxy has been stable for too long. The major powers have grown complacent, rigid in their thinking. They need competition to drive further evolution. Marcus began to understand. You're using us as weapons. Partners, the evolved corrected gently. Though partnership implies a choice you haven't yet earned. Currently, you're being tested. The sound of approaching engines echoed through the chamber. Marcus's Zalani pursuers had apparently decided to board the station themselves rather than wait for his report. Ah, the evolved said with apparent pleasure. Your escorts have arrived. How convenient. They'll kill me once they get what they want. Probably, the being agreed. Unless you demonstrate that your species deserves better treatment. Marcus heard footsteps and voices in the corridor outside. The Zalani had found his trail and were following it toward the central chamber. He had minutes at most before they arrived. What kind of demonstration? The evolved gestured toward the star map. This station contains technology beyond anything your pursuers have ever encountered. Weapons, defenses, and capabilities that could tip the balance of power in this region. Show them that humans are not the helpless primitives they believe you to be. I don't know how to operate any of this. You will, the evolved said, pressing something into Marcus's hand. It felt like a crystalline data chip, but warm to the touch, almost organic. Your species' adaptability is its greatest strength. Use it. The voices in the corridor were getting closer. Marcus could hear at least 3 different beings speaking in the fluid tones of the Zalani language. Why help me? Because chaos serves our purposes, the evolved replied, already fading back into the shadows. And because it's time for the galaxy to remember that evolution never truly stops. The being disappeared completely just as the first Zalani warrior entered the chamber. Marcus pocketed the crystal and turned to face his pursuers, hoping he looked more confident than he felt. 3 Zalani soldiers in full combat armor stepped into the central chamber, their weapons trained on Marcus. Behind them came a 4th figure, this one wearing the elaborate uniform of a naval commander. The feline being's whiskers twitched with satisfaction as it surveyed the ancient technology surrounding them. Well done, human, the commander purred. You've led us to quite a prize. Our xenoarchaeologists will spend decades cataloging everything here. Marcus said nothing, trying to project calm while his mind raced. The crystal in his pocket felt warm against his leg, and he could swear he felt information flowing from it into his consciousness. Technical specifications, operational procedures, command protocols, all flooding into his awareness like remembered skills. Of course, the commander continued, your services are no longer required. Kill him. The nearest soldier raised his weapon, finger moving toward the trigger. Marcus reached out instinctively toward the nearest control surface, and the station responded to his touch like it had been waiting for him all along. The moment Marcus's hand touched the control surface, the ancient station erupted into life with terrifying efficiency. Energy barriers slammed down around the Zalani soldiers, trapping them in translucent cages that hummed with barely contained power. The commander's weapon discharged harmlessly against the barrier, its plasma bolt dispersing like water against glass. Impossible! The commander snarled. his feline features twisted with rage and disbelief. Human technology can't interface with pre-Confederation systems. Marcus was as surprised as his captors, but he didn't let it show. The knowledge flowing from the crystal felt like remembering something he'd always known. Command protocols, defensive systems, weapons arrays, all of it made perfect sense in a way that defied explanation. "You underestimated us," Marcus said, his voice carrying more confidence than he felt. "That seems to be a common mistake." Through the station's newly accessible sensor network, Marcus could see the 3 Zilani interceptors holding position near the ancient structure. Their crews were probably wondering why their boarding party had stopped reporting. Soon they'd send reinforcements, or simply destroy the station to eliminate potential witnesses. Marcus needed to act fast. "Release us immediately," the commander demanded, though his tone had shifted from arrogant to worried. "Our ships will destroy this structure. If we don't report in within the hour, then you'd better hope I figure out how to keep you alive that long," Marcus replied, his attention already turning to the station's defensive capabilities. What he found made his breath catch. The ancient structure wasn't just a research facility, it was a fortress designed to withstand attacks by entire fleets. Weapon systems that could punch through contemporary shielding like tissue paper, defensive barriers that could deflect planetary bombardment, and sensor arrays that could track targets across multiple star systems. All of it waiting for someone with the proper authorization to activate it. Marcus placed his other hand on a second control surface, and new information flooded his consciousness. The station had been watching not just humanity, but dozens of species across the galaxy. The Zilani were listed as aggressive expansionist civilization, with detailed tactical assessments of their military capabilities and strategic weaknesses. According to the ancient database, the Zilani supremacy had been growing increasingly bold in their territorial expansion, using a combination of economic pressure and military intimidation to absorb smaller civilizations. Their treatment of humanity wasn't unusual, it was standard operating procedure for any species they considered inferior. But the database also contained something more interesting. Records of other species that had been underestimated by the established powers, only to rise and reshape the galactic balance. The evolved hadn't just been watching humanity, they'd been collecting data on potential catalysts for change. "Warning," came a new voice from the station's communication system, speaking in the commander's native language. "Unknown vessels have powered weapons systems. Station defenses are activating." Through the external sensors, Marcus watched the Zilani interceptors orient their weapons toward the station. Plasma cannons, torpedo tubes, and particle beam arrays all swiveled to target the ancient structure's hull. Combined, the 3 ships carried enough firepower to level a small city. "You've killed us all," the commander hissed. "Our ships will reduce this station to debris, rather than let ancient technology fall into human hands." Marcus was beginning to understand that the commander was probably right about his ship's intentions, though wrong about the outcome. The Zilani would indeed try to destroy the station rather than risk losing their technological advantage. What they didn't realize was that they were about to attack a fortress designed by beings who had watched civilizations rise and fall across millennia. "Station defense grid, activate full protective measures," Marcus said, the words coming from knowledge he didn't remember learning. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Energy barriers flashed into existence around the station's hull, just as the first Zilani plasma bolts arrived. The ancient shields didn't just absorb the incoming fire, they converted it into additional power for the station's systems. Marcus felt the station's weapons coming online, targeting systems that could track a single fighter across an entire solar system. The Zilani interceptors were powerful by contemporary standards, but they were facing technology that predated their civilization by thousands of years. "Stand down your vessels," Marcus transmitted to the Zilani ships. "You're outgunned and outmatched. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences." The response was predictable. The Zilani increased their rate of fire, concentrating everything they had against the station's shields. Plasma bolts, photon torpedoes, and particle beams created a light show that would have been visible from neighboring star systems. The ancient barriers barely flickered. "Impossible," the commander repeated, watching his ship's futile assault through the chamber's displays. No single installation could withstand 3 heavy interceptors. Your ships are impressive, Marcus admitted, studying the tactical readouts. For their era, but you're fighting technology designed to survive wars that ended before your species learned to make fire. He was beginning to understand the scope of what the Evolved had created. This wasn't just a research station, it was a test. A way to measure how different species would react when given access to overwhelming power. Would they use it wisely? Would they become tyrants? Or would they find some middle path between weakness and oppression? Marcus made his decision. Station weapons. Target the interceptor's engine systems. Disable. Don't destroy. Targeting, acknowledged. The station's computer responded in its eerily calm voice. What happened next defied everything Marcus thought he knew about space combat. Instead of launching missiles or firing energy beams, the station seemed to reach out and simply touch the Zilani ships. One moment they were maneuvering at full power. The next, their engines went dark and they began drifting helplessly through space. Engine systems offline. Came panicked transmissions from all 3 vessels. All propulsion systems non-responsive. Requesting immediate assistance. Assistance? The commander in the chamber snarled. You've doomed your entire species, human. When word of this reaches the supremacy, they'll launch a full battle fleet to reclaim this technology. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Probably. Unless they decide the cost is too high. What cost? You have one ancient station against the might of an interstellar empire. I have one ancient station that just disabled 3 of your best ships without breaking a sweat, Marcus corrected. How do you think your fleet commanders will react when they realize they're facing technology that can shut down their vessels from across a star system? The implications were starting to sink in. The Zilani had built their expansion strategy around technological superiority. The ability to overwhelm potential enemies with superior firepower and advanced systems. If that advantage disappeared, their entire military doctrine would need to be reconsidered. But Marcus wasn't finished. Through the station's communication arrays, he began broadcasting a message across multiple frequencies, ensuring it would reach not just the disabled Zilani ships, but any vessels within several light-years of their position. This is Captain Marcus Chen of the independent vessel Wanderer, he transmitted. I am speaking from a pre-Confederation research facility in the Gehenna Reach. I want to make something clear to anyone who might be listening. He paused, looking directly at the trapped Zilani commander. Humanity has been dismissed as primitive and irrelevant by most galactic civilizations. We've been told we don't belong among the stars, that we're too young and too stupid to handle real responsibility. Today, that assessment proved to be incorrect. Through the station's sensors, Marcus could see more ships appearing at the edge of the system. Word was spreading fast about the confrontation, and curious observers were arriving to witness the outcome. I didn't seek this confrontation, Marcus continued his broadcast. I came here looking for opportunity, not war. But when faced with beings who saw me as nothing more than expendable bait, I chose to defend myself with whatever means were available. The commander's expression had shifted from rage to calculation. Marcus could see the feline being's mind working, probably trying to figure out how to turn this situation to his advantage. The technology you see here represents power beyond anything currently available to galactic civilization, Marcus went on. It could tip the balance of any conflict, overthrow any government, or establish new empires across the galaxy. The question is, what should be done with such power? More ships were arriving now. Marcus's sensors detected vessels from a dozen different species, all drawn by reports of an impossible battle between humans and Zilani forces. Some were probably military scouts, others might be merchants hoping to profit from whatever salvage remained. I propose a different approach, Marcus transmitted. This station and its technology should not belong to any single species or government. It should serve as a neutral research facility, sharing its discoveries with any civilization willing to contribute to galactic advancement rather than galactic conflict. The Zilani commander laughed bitterly. Noble words from someone who holds all the advantages. How long before power corrupts you, human? How long before you become everything you claim to oppose? It was a fair question, And one Marcus had been asking himself. The temptation to use the station's capabilities for personal gain was enormous. He could return to Earth as a hero, establish humanity as a major power, or simply disappear into the galaxy's unexplored regions, with technology that would make him effectively untouchable. But he'd also seen what the pursuit of power had done to civilizations like the Zilani supremacy. They'd become so focused on dominance that they'd lost sight of progress, so concerned with controlling others that they'd stopped growing themselves. Maybe it will corrupt me, Marcus admitted. Maybe I'll become exactly the kind of tyrant this galaxy already has too many of. But I'm going to try something different first. He activated new systems within the station, opening communication channels that reached across the galaxy to universities, research institutions, and scientific organizations on dozens of worlds. This is an open invitation, he broadcast to them all. Send your best researchers, your most brilliant scientists, your most innovative engineers. Work together to unlock the secrets of this place. Share the discoveries freely among all civilizations willing to participate peacefully. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages began pouring in from research facilities across known space, requesting coordinates, offering cooperation, and proposing joint ventures. Not all of them were altruistic. Marcus could see the greed and ambition behind many of the responses. But enough seemed genuinely interested in advancement over advantage. You can't be serious, the commander said. You're going to give away the greatest technological find in galactic history? I'm going to share it. Marcus corrected. There's a difference. Anyone who comes here with peaceful intentions and genuine scientific curiosity will be welcome. Anyone who comes with conquest in mind will face the same reception you received. To demonstrate his point, Marcus activated the station's long-range sensors and targeted several of the military vessels that were taking aggressive positions at the system's edge. Not to damage them, but to scan their system so thoroughly that their crews would know they'd been completely analyzed and cataloged. The effect was immediate. Ships that had been maneuvering for attack positions suddenly found themselves backing away as their commanders realized they were facing technology that could map every system on their vessels from impossible distances. This is what I'm offering the galaxy. Marcus continued his broadcast. Cooperation over competition. Shared advancement instead of zero-sum conflicts. And protection for any species willing to contribute rather than conquer. He looked directly at the Zilani commander. Your people have a choice. You can return to the supremacy and report that humanity has acquired devastating weapons that threaten your expansion plans. That will probably result in a war that will cost both our species dearly. Marcus gestured toward the displays, showing the growing collection of ships around the system. Or you can report that humanity has discovered something that could benefit everyone, and that the Zilani supremacy has an opportunity to be part of something greater than territorial expansion. The commander's whiskers twitched as he considered the options. And if we choose cooperation? What guarantee do we have that you won't use this technology against us later? The same guarantee I have that you won't try to destroy this place the moment you think you can get away with it, Marcus replied. None. We'll have to trust each other. Or at least trust our mutual self-interest. It wasn't much of a foundation for galactic peace, but it was more than had existed before. And Marcus was beginning to realize that the Evolved had planned for exactly this scenario. They hadn't just left behind a weapons platform or a research facility, they'd created a test that would force emerging species to choose between isolation, domination, or cooperation. Humanity had just chosen cooperation. Now they had to see if the rest of the galaxy was ready to do the same. Release my people, the commander said finally. Let us return to our ships. I'll carry your message to the supremacy, though I can't promise how they'll respond. Marcus nodded and began deactivating the containment fields. As the energy barriers faded, the Zilani soldiers stepped back, warily, their weapons still drawn but no longer targeting him directly. Your ship's engines will be restored once you reach minimum safe distance, Marcus informed them. Consider it a gesture of good faith. The commander studied him for a long moment. You realize you've just changed everything? The balance of power? The political landscape? The very nature of how species interact with each other? Someone had to, Marcus replied. The old ways weren't working for anyone, except those already on top. As the Zilani filed out of the chamber, heading back toward their disabled ships, Marcus turned his attention to the flood of incoming communications from across the galaxy. Research proposals, diplomatic inquiries, trade offers, and more than a few threats from governments that saw the station as a danger to their established authority. The work was just beginning. But for the first time since leaving Earth, Marcus felt like he belonged exactly where he was, not as a primitive human playing at galactic civilization, but as a catalyst for something entirely new. The solo human had indeed struck back, but not with weapons or vengeance. He'd struck back with possibility. 6 months after the incident at the Gehenna station, the galaxy had become a very different place. Marcus stood in what had once been the station's central chamber, now converted into a vast conference hall, where representatives from 47 different species gathered to share research and plan joint expeditions. The transformation was remarkable. Where once there had been empty corridors and dormant machinery, now there were laboratories humming with activity, living quarters housing scientists from across the galaxy, and communication centers that coordinated research projects spanning dozens of star systems. But the most significant change wasn't in the station itself, it was in how the various species treated each other, and how they treated humanity. The quantum resonance patterns are fascinating, Dr. Cathara was saying, her crystalline selenite form refracting light as she gestured toward a holographic display. But I believe the human insight about chaotic harmonics might be the key to unlocking the propulsion system. Marcus smiled as he watched the exchange. 6 months ago, Dr. Cathara's species had considered humans barely intelligent enough to operate basic machinery. Now she was crediting human intuition with breakthrough discoveries in ancient technology. It hadn't been an easy transition. The first few weeks had seen constant conflicts, as researchers from traditionally hostile species tried to work together. Old prejudices died hard, and the temptation to steal rather than share had proven almost irresistible for some participants. But the station itself had ways of encouraging cooperation. Marcus had discovered that the Evolved had built behavioral modification systems into the facility's very structure. Not mind control, nothing so crude or obvious. Instead, the station somehow enhanced empathy and pattern recognition while dampening aggressive impulses. Beings who entered with thoughts of conquest or theft found their perspectives gradually shifting toward curiosity and collaboration. The effect was subtle, but profound. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves working together on projects that benefited everyone. Resource conflicts became opportunities for trade negotiations. Territorial disputes evolved into joint exploration ventures. Captain Chen, came a familiar voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Commander Veltar, the same Zilani officer who had tried to kill him 6 months earlier. The feline being's military uniform had been replaced with the practical coveralls of a research coordinator. "Commander," Marcus replied, still finding it strange to have casual conversations with someone who had once ordered his execution. "The Supremacy Council has approved the resource allocation for the next phase of deep space exploration," Veltar reported. 12 ships, mixed crews, with humanity providing the navigation specialists. It was remarkable how much had changed. The Zilani Supremacy had initially responded to news of the station with predictable aggression, assembling a battle fleet to reclaim what they saw as rightfully theirs by conquest. But when the fleet arrived, they found the station defended not just by ancient weapons, but by a coalition of species that had already experienced the benefits of cooperation. The battle that followed had been brief and decisive. The station's defenses had proven capable of disabling entire fleets without destroying them, while the coalition's combined knowledge had allowed them to understand and counter Zilani tactics with devastating efficiency. But instead of humiliating defeat, the Supremacy had been offered something more valuable: partnership and discoveries that dwarfed anything they could achieve through conquest alone. "How are the crew integrations progressing?" Marcus asked. "Better than expected," Veltar admitted. "The humans adapt to mixed crews faster than any other species we've worked with. Your people seem to have an unusual talent for finding common ground with beings who should be natural enemies." It was true, though Marcus suspected the trait had been forged by necessity rather than evolution. Humans had spent their entire spacefaring history as the weakest species in galactic civilization, forced to find ways to get along with beings who saw them as inferior. That experience had taught them skills that proved invaluable when dealing with the complex politics of multi-species cooperation. "Any word from the expedition to the Andromeda signals?" Marcus asked. Dr. Himura's team reported another successful translation yesterday, Veltar replied. "It appears the signals are indeed from an intelligent civilization outside our galaxy. The linguistic patterns match theoretical models for non-carbon-based consciousness." Marcus nodded, trying to process the implications. The ancient station hadn't just been watching local civilizations, it had been monitoring communications across intergalactic distances. The database contained fragments of transmissions from dozens of external galaxies, suggesting a universe far more densely populated than anyone had imagined. "The evolved knew," Marcus mused. "They knew we weren't alone even within our local group of galaxies. It raises questions about their ultimate purpose." Veltar agreed. "Why study emerging civilizations unless there was some greater context we don't yet understand?" It was a question that had been troubling Marcus for months. The evolved had clearly been testing humanity. But for what? The station's databases hinted at larger projects. References to something called the Convergence Protocol that would supposedly activate when certain conditions were met. But every attempt to access those deeper files had been blocked by security systems that remained beyond their comprehension. "Captain Chen?" A new voice interrupted his thoughts. Marcus turned to see Dr. Sarah Walsh, one of the few other humans working permanently at the station. The xenolinguist had been instrumental in establishing communication protocols between species that had never shared common languages. "What is it, Sarah?" "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth," she said, her expression troubled. "The Terran Colonial Administration is sending an official delegation. They want to discuss proper oversight of human activities in the Gehenna region." Marcus sighed. He'd been expecting this. Earth's government had initially been thrilled by humanity's sudden rise to galactic prominence, but that enthusiasm had quickly turned to anxiety as they realized they couldn't control what was happening at the station. The TCA wanted to claim authority over the discovery, to establish official Earth government oversight of the research, and ensure that any benefits flowed through proper channels. They'd been making increasingly urgent demands for Marcus to return to Earth for debriefing and to transfer control of the station to appropriate authorities. "When will the delegation arrive?" Marcus asked. 3 days, Sarah replied. "And Marcus?" "They're not coming alone. Intelligence reports suggest they're bringing a military escort." That was troubling but not entirely surprising. Earth's government had probably convinced itself that Marcus was either being manipulated by alien influences or had gone rogue entirely. From their perspective, a single human controlling technology that could reshape galactic civilization was a threat to proper order. "How large a military escort?" 6 ships, Sarah said quietly. "Heavy cruisers with full marine complements." Marcus felt a familiar chill. Earth was coming to the station with enough firepower to level a planet. Apparently convinced that overwhelming force was the appropriate response to humanity's first major galactic breakthrough. They were about to learn the same lesson the Zalani had learned 6 months earlier. But first, Marcus needed to understand exactly what Earth's government was thinking. He activated a communication link to the approaching delegation, routing it through the station's powerful transmitters to ensure perfect clarity across the vast distances involved. "Administrator Collins," Marcus said as the face of Earth's colonial administrator appeared on his screen. The man looked older than Marcus remembered, with new lines of stress around his eyes. "Captain Chen," Collins replied formally. "I trust you've received notification of our arrival?" "I have. I'm curious about the military escort. Are you expecting trouble?" Collins's expression hardened. "We're expecting to reclaim control of humanity's most important discovery from someone who may no longer be acting in Earth's best interests." "I see. And you believe 6 warships are necessary for this reclamation?" "We believe 6 warships are necessary to ensure that proper authority is respected," Collins corrected. "You've been operating independently for too long, Chen. It's time to return to proper oversight." Marcus looked around the conference hall, where dozens of species were working together on projects that would have been impossible under Earth's bureaucratic oversight. Mathematical proofs that required 3 different types of consciousness to complete. engineering projects that combined the physical capabilities of 8 different species, diplomatic solutions that drew on thousands of years of collective experience from across the galaxy. Administrator Collins, Marcus said carefully, I think you're misunderstanding what's been accomplished here. I understand perfectly, Collins snapped. You've given away technology that could have secured Earth's position in the galaxy for centuries. Instead of ensuring human dominance, you've created a cooperative where our advantages are shared with species that have no reason to be loyal to humanity. The fundamental disconnect was obvious. Earth's government still thought in terms of zero-sum competition, where one species' advancement required another's decline. They couldn't conceive of a scenario where everyone could benefit simultaneously. What if I told you that humanity's current position in galactic civilization is stronger now than it would have been if we'd kept the technology to ourselves? I'd say you've been spending too much time with alien influences, Collins replied. Real strength comes from real advantages, not from giving away our superiority to beings who would destroy us the moment they had the chance. Marcus terminated the communication and turned to find that the conference hall had gone quiet. Representatives from dozens of species had been listening to the exchange, their expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Is Earth truly planning to attack this station? Asked Dr. Kethara, her crystalline form flickering with what Marcus had learned to recognize as anxiety. They're planning to assert control, Marcus replied. Whether that requires an attack depends on how committed they are to the attempt. Commander Veltar stepped forward, his hand resting on a weapon that hadn't been there moments before. The Coalition will not permit Earth to destroy what we've built here. That was exactly what Marcus had been afraid of. In trying to secure human dominance, Earth's government was about to create a conflict between humanity and the very alliance that had elevated their species to galactic prominence. There won't be a battle, Marcus said firmly. I'll handle the delegation when they arrive. How? Veltar demanded. Your own government is bringing enough firepower to sterilize this station. Marcus looked around the room at beings who had become not just colleagues but friends over the past 6 months. Scientists who shared their discoveries freely, engineers who worked together on impossible projects, and diplomats who had found ways to resolve conflicts that had festered for millennia. Earth's government saw them as threats to human supremacy. Marcus saw them as the future of galactic civilization. The same way I handled your fleet, Marcus replied. By showing them that cooperation is more powerful than conquest. 3 days later, the Earth delegation arrived with characteristic human efficiency. 6 heavy cruisers dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons powered but not yet targeted. It was an impressive display of military coordination, exactly the kind of overwhelming force that had served humanity well in their early conflicts with hostile alien species. Unfortunately for Administrator Collins, he was no longer dealing with early contact scenarios. Marcus watched the approaching fleet from the station's command center, surrounded by representatives from the Coalition species. The ancient facility's sensors were tracking every system on the Earth ships, analyzing their capabilities and cataloging their weaknesses with casual precision. Incoming transmission from the Earth flagship, reported Dr. Walsh from her communication station. Put it through, Marcus replied. Administrator Collins appeared on the main display, flanked by military officers whose uniforms indicated they represented Earth's elite colonial defense force. Behind them, Marcus could see Marine units preparing for deployment. Captain Chen, Collins began formally, by the authority of the Terran Colonial Administration and the United Earth Government, I am ordering you to surrender control of this station and all associated technologies. You have 1 hour to comply before we implement mandatory recovery procedures. Marcus looked at the faces around him, beings from species that Earth's government probably still considered inferior, but who had become some of the most important collaborators in galactic history. Administrator Collins, Marcus replied, I formally decline your order. The response was immediate. Targeting sensors from all 6 Earth ships locked onto the ancient station, weapon systems powered to full charge, and launch tubes loaded with enough ordnance to reduce the facility to component atoms. You have 30 minutes to reconsider, Collins transmitted. This is your final warning. Marcus activated the station's defensive systems. What followed was a demonstration that would be remembered throughout galactic history as the moment when humanity truly came of age among the stars. The ancient station didn't just neutralize the Earth fleet, it absorbed their weapons fire, analyzed their tactical protocols, and systematically disabled every offensive system they possessed without harming a single crew member. Within 15 minutes, 6 of Earth's most powerful warships were drifting helplessly in space, their crews unharmed but their confidence thoroughly shattered. "This is impossible," came Collins's shaken voice over the communication link. "No single installation could defeat an entire battle fleet. The same installation that disabled 3 Zelani interceptors 6 months ago." Marcus replied gently. "The same technology you wanted to claim for Earth's exclusive use." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "Administrator Collins," end quote. "Would you like to come aboard and see what humanity has actually accomplished here?" The delegation that eventually docked with the station was subdued and wary, but Marcus could see curiosity beginning to overcome their initial hostility. Administrator Collins and his officers were escorted through laboratories where human scientists worked alongside alien researchers, developing technologies that neither species could have created alone. They saw communication systems that allowed instantaneous contact across the galaxy, propulsion theories that promised travel to neighboring galaxies, and medical advances that could extend the lifespan of every known species. But most importantly, they saw humanity not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals among equals. "This is what you've built?" Collins asked quietly as they stood in the central conference hall, watching a presentation where human intuition was being combined with Vorthak logic and selenite pattern recognition to solve fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself. "This is what we've built together," Marcus corrected. "Humanity didn't need to dominate the galaxy to find our place in it. We needed to prove that we belonged here." Collins was quiet for a long time, watching the collaborative work that filled every corner of the station. Finally, he spoke again. "The TCA will need to reconsider our policies regarding independent human operations." "The TCA will need to reconsider a lot of things," Marcus agreed. "Because this is just the beginning." He gestured toward displays that showed expeditions preparing to depart for distant galaxies, contact protocols being developed for truly alien intelligences, and research projects that could fundamentally reshape the nature of existence itself. "The galaxy is bigger than we imagined, Administrator. And humanity's role in it is just starting to unfold." As Collins and his delegation returned to their ships, now fully operational again, but with a much different perspective on humanity's place in the universe, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that day in the Nexus station. Cantina. The aliens who had once mocked him as a primitive meat brain now sought out human perspectives on their most challenging problems. The species that had dismissed humanity as irrelevant now competed to include human representatives in their most important expeditions. And somewhere in the depths of the ancient station, the evolved watched and approved as their test subjects proved worthy of the larger universe that awaited them. The solo human had indeed struck back, but not with vengeance or conquest. He had struck back with possibility, with cooperation, and with the simple but revolutionary idea that being different didn't mean being inferior. It was the most human response imaginable, and it had changed everything.